Welcome to another candid and convivial conversation. And today I'm thrilled that my special guest is Andrew Griffiths, the one and only, the #1 small business author in Australia. And I understand, Andrew, your books have been published in over 60 countries as well.
Well, sold in 60 countries, translated into, I think, about 11 now in different languages. I'm big in the Estonian market, Ian.
Well, welcome, Andrew. It's a thrill to have you today. And our subject is the Energized Entrepreneur. And I thought we better start. We better start with, well, what's an entrepreneur before we get into the energized bit?
Isn't that a funny kind of question now, how times have changed? I love the fact now that if you talk to, and I'm sure you'd be the same, Ian, and I've got to say, it's so lovely to be on your show, having known of you and, known each other for a long, long time in a industry-wide way. So thank you. But that discussion around entrepreneurs, I know that if I stood in front of a room full of small business owners and I said, who in here is an entrepreneur, you know what? Most of them wouldn't put up their hand. Most of them would go, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a small business owner.
No.
And I often found that quite an interesting distinction, as far as I'm concerned. Because I think to be a small business owner, you've got to be an entrepreneur. You've got to be a hustler. You've got to be making things happen. You've got to be the one who drives it. You've got to do all of that type of stuff. So I kind of call them the same thing. And I think it's anyone who's going to have a go. Anyone who's unemployable, basically, is an entrepreneur or a small business owner. We've realised that we can't work for someone else, so we're better off doing it for ourselves. That's my take.
Interesting you say that, I think, because I've noticed recently there's actually a bit of a surge in entrepreneurs. People inside organisations who've got the entrepreneurial mindset, which I think is terrific. In fact, I've seen some great stuff from an organisation called the League of Entrepreneurs. So it seems to me, and you and I are good pals with Daniel Priestley, but he put out this, the Entrepreneur Revolution, which I think is a brilliant book as well. But it seems to me we're in the grip of perhaps the greatest entrepreneurial revolution in history. And absolutely. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you was it seems to me, therefore, that so every man and his dog is out there trying to be an entrepreneur. And it was this word energized that got me intrigued. I mean, I haven't read all your books, but I reckon I'm up to 12 or 13. So what's an energized entrepreneur?
Well, it's a good point. Just to go back one, though, I do agree totally that we're in this entrepreneurial revolution, and I think it's only going to grow. I think we're going to reach a stage where everyone is ultimately some kind of entrepreneur in the smallest of sense. Like you're referring a friend, or you're running a business, or you're selling something online, or you're buying from some area. And I think we see that now with so many new businesses, like the change with the home-based business. Remember before, if you ran a business from home, I remember I ran a business from home 25 years ago, and people would come up and kind of pat you on the shoulder and go, mate, don't worry, it'll get better. It'll get okay. You'll be right one day. Do you need a few bucks while I'm here? And now people say, oh, so where do you operate from? So I operate from home. And they go, oh God, tell me, how do you do that? I really want to do that. How can I get out of this? I just want to run a business from home. And I go, how times have changed. But God, we could talk about that for days, that wonderful thing. I think the energized side of things there is, I think that's a part of the entrepreneurial spirit. Those of us who are entrepreneurs and have been, for whatever reason, I think we're born entrepreneurs in many respects, even if it doesn't manifest until we're later in life, it comes out. But I think that we're energized by the concept of doing business, of making things, of creating things, of visualizing or coming up with an idea and then turning it into a situation where someone will actually buy it. It's never about the money. I think that's what all entrepreneurs will say. The money is on the side. That's nice. And hopefully we make it. But it really is about, I thought of this, I built it or made it, and someone bought it. That's really cool. And that energizes me as an entrepreneur. And I'm sure it does you as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I often think about it. I mean, I think Seth Godin's written a lot about the freelancer. There's portfolio workers. There's a renaissance in the artisan or the artist, and
Absolutely.
I think it's fantastic, and it really says to me that if you've got the energy and the passion, you can go out and make whatever you want.
And interesting too, I think that whole conversation that I love around that fact is we're living in the era where people really are looking for those who are masters in their craft, who do what they do really well. And I was listening to an amazing thing on the radio the other day where they were talking about there's this move for people that want to go back and work and on the land. But they don't want to go back and buy a 5,000 acre wheat farm. They want to go back and buy a 20 acre farm, grow some cows and make artisan cheese. They want to make camembert, or they want to make a type of yogurt, or they want to and do it really well. Now, we know this has been happening in the Pacific Northwest of America in particular for the last 20 years, and it's happened in pockets around Australia. But we're seeing people saying, well, I want to do one thing and I want to do it really well, and I want to be known for one thing. I want to be known as that person who, I'm the boat guy, I'm the cafe guy, I'm the camembert cheese lady, I'm the camel milk guy, whatever it might be. And I find that extraordinarily fascinating. I watch a lot of shows. I research all this stuff all around the world to see what people are doing, ideas-wise, and that. And the one thing that I see time and time again, Ian, is this desire for people to be the best at making something, or delivering something, and solving a problem, and just reading about that stuff makes me feel excited and energized, and I love it.
And I think it's the joy of it too. I have my daughter she's a textile artist,
right?
And she's always had a fascination with children's books.
Okay.
And she wanted to combine the two. And last year she put out a thing on Possible, one of those crowdfunding sites. And fantastically, she got oversubscribed. And so what she did in the kids' book is she made all of the characters with textiles, had them photographed, and then put them in the book.
I love that. Again, that's entrepreneurial. It's innovative thinking, isn't it?
And it took a lot of energy from her to put it out there, get the crowdfunding and all that kind of stuff, which really intrigued me. But I think at the heart of it, the reason that she had the energy was because she was in love with her work.
Yeah. She didn't do it to make $1 million. She didn't do it to do that. That's always a bonus. And sometimes, I might add, I think that's a downfall at times for us as entrepreneurs as well. Because, we both know many, many entrepreneurs. And are they driven by money? No, they're not. I think that maybe you reach a stage where, you've got to pay the mortgage and you kind of have to grow up and be a bit more realistic about it. But we are driven by creating good stuff. We're committed by the freedom of being able to decide what we make, what we do, live and die by our own mistakes. It's quite a maverick kind of a lifestyle. Even if it doesn't feel like we've got freedom, I think that we have.
No, there's no doubt. And I think we've all heard the phrase, if you do what you love, the money flows.
Sure, yeah.
And I personally think that's rubbish. And I've always felt that way, because a lot of people, I think every human being has got a great idea. Question is, can that idea be brought to bear in the service of others? And I know it all, because I left the corporate world, where I successfully ran a $100 million division of a multinational company. And I thought when I left the corporate world, I thought it's going to be easy. People are going to want to know what I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, going from the corporate offices to my bedroom, that was a shock to the system. and those first few years, were bloody hard. And then I reckon, and I kind of found my own way. And then about a decade or so ago, I read a book called The Radical Leap by Stephen Faber. And a phrase in the book has had me, it grabbed my heart the moment I read it, and it's had me ever since. And the phrase is, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me, Andrew, when I saw you speak at the Key Person of Influence event probably 3 or 4 years ago, you are a person doing what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
It's a wonderful description. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I find that the secret is to try and, when we're trying to help people who want to be energized entrepreneurs, it's helping them to do what they love, but to help them also to find out who's going to love that.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your journey, how did you go about finding the people who love your work?
I think you got to kiss a few toads, along the way before you find a prince, really, don't you? I guess I'm a Seth Godin fan, so I always like what Seth has to say, like a lot of people, and it's something really resonated with me when I saw him in Sydney recently, and he said something that along the lines of that if you're running a workshop or an event, and if a couple of people don't walk out because it's not what they wanted or they didn't like you or whatever, then you're not trying hard enough. And and that kind of gave me permission to rethink everything, because I think up until then, a lot of time I was trying to be a crowd pleaser. I would try and be populist and say what I thought was popular, and so I think that that was something changed in me when I heard him say that. And I thought I got permission to be a little bit different. But then I found that over the years I've worked in, as a writer and an entrepreneur in different spaces. I've, worked in different niches, I guess, in financial planning, where I've been delivering a lot of stuff, or some particular small business stuff. But then when KPI came along for me and I started teaching people how to write books, it came along at an interesting time, because I also found I was presenting a lot. And so for me, I was going to a room filled with strangers. I presented for an hour and then I kind of left. And there was really no connection or engagement apart from what happened on the stage or over a biscuit and a cup of tea afterwards. And I realized I was actually really craving some connection. So then the opportunity came with Daniel Priestley rang me from London and said, we want you to teach this. Can you teach publishing? And I met Dan many, many years ago. And I said, Dan, look, I know how to write books, but I don't really know how to teach people how to write books. And of course, in Dan's style, he said, well, stop being a baby, just do it. And I went, right. Oh, okay. So I deconstructed, and then I started to teach people how to write books. And I went, you know what? I love this. And it's a 40-week program. I'm with these people. So I get to teach them what I know, and they want to learn. And that's why they're doing it exactly as you're saying there. And of course, I built great friendships with some of the people on the line. I see two there. I look at the guys and go, I built friendships. I influence them in a positive way. And I think when you find that sweet spot where you're doing what you really love and your audience really loves what you do, God, it is extraordinary. Like the amount of love that I get back from these people that I take. Honestly, Ian, you got no idea how humbling it is. I got a bookshelf behind me here that's got 200 books in it from people that I've helped to write. Every single one has got the most extraordinary message written in it, and cards and those type of things, where I've had, it almost makes me, tear up just thinking about it. In those days when it's not such a good day, and I go and stand in front of my bookshelf, and it's locked. Anyone comes into my house, no, you can't go into that bookshelf. Hands off. That's my little treasure chest. And I think that was probably, so the last 4 or 5 years has been that time when I really have been, found the people that I love and have been able to teach what I really love. And that's why that quote that you mentioned there resonates so extraordinarily deeply for me. I think I've always enjoyed what I've done. I've always loved what I've done, whether it's been teaching people to dive or presenting about business, whatever it is. But I now understand what it really means when the audience loves you back, and then you go, they trust you, they believe in your advice, they know that you will not lead them astray, and I take that as an extraordinary responsibility as well. The people that I work with, oh my God, you know, like I would do anything for any of them, and I would never betray their trust. You know, God, I couldn't think of anything worse than that.
Isn't it funny how you know, somebody else brought that to you as well, which I find fascinating. I mean, this happened to me as well when an actual colleague of mine, we were talking about various things, and I was saying, look, I'm really looking for something, you know, a different direction. I've been doing this for, you know, over 20 years. And he said to me, why don't you, and, you know, my thing's been mentoring as very different to coaching. And my mate said to me, why don't you mentor mentors? And I went, what do you mean? And he said, well, you know, you probably know more than anyone on the planet about this. Why don't you teach other people what you know and help them to apply the principles in their own way? And I went, I never thought of that.
And yet it's so obvious, isn't it? To someone else looking at you, go, well, of course, you become the mentor's mentor. That is the perfect role for you.
Well, and I never thought of it.
Extraordinary. Well, and it's a couple of things came out of this for me with Dan. I mean, and one thing I've learned over life, particularly since I've been writing, I play a long game, and I'm a very big. I give away thousands of my books. I'm like my publisher's biggest customer. I buy books, give books away. That's what I teach people. It's not about selling books in a bookshop. It's about leveraging what you have, and every book is a seed. And the whole reason that I'm doing what I'm doing today, which is extraordinary in many respects, is because I met Dan Priestley on the Gold Coast 10 years ago. 12 years ago, him and Glenn Carlson, two wonderful friends of mine, and Dan said to me, you know, one day I'm going to write a book. And I said, mate, good on you. If I can ever help you, great. Here's one of mine. Take it. And it started this friendship, where it's gone to now. I mean, that as a piece of advice to everyone, that to me is that sowing seeds, whatever it is. I mean, I do a lot of writing. I write for Inc. out of New York. I'm the only Australian columnist for Inc. So I'm really proud of that fact. Very hard to write for those guys.
Yes.
You know, like 18 million people a month kind of go to that. It's just extraordinary entrepreneurial site. And the reason that I'm writing for Inc. is because, well, I guess I can write reasonably good. But again, a number of years ago, I gave a bloke a book, and he ended up becoming the editor, the guy who runs, Eric, who runs Inc. And it's just sowing seeds and playing a long game. You know, every Friday, if I'm at home, you know, there's a pile of books on my table that I'm sending, and I'm the farmer. I tell the courier guy, I'm farming. How's the farming going, Andrew? I'm going, mate, great, good, proper pile of seeds going out today, mate. Pile of seeds. And even when I go to the post office in town, if people go, oh, you're picking up some of your fruit and veggies, and I go, absolutely, they're always coming back. And that part of that, I think the thrill and the excitement and the anticipation of the unknown, what can happen, I think that keeps me energized as well. And I'm sure you're the same, and many entrepreneurs are, Ian, where we kind of, our fear is rigidity and same. You know, we're a little bit addicted to uncertainty, and that is what kind of keeps us excited. You know, we'd like to have a paycheck of $1 million coming in every week. We'd like that certainty, but we like the uncertainty that comes with the entrepreneurial life.
Well, and I think interesting you talk about seeding, and I think sometimes I'm sure you've met lots of entrepreneurs too. What we want, and I've certainly been like this, and I can easily get like this. You know, we plant the seed, and then we want to rip it up and see what it looks like, and it's too early.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid,
exactly.
When I was a kid, my grandfather was a farmer, and he actually taught me the law of the farm. And he'd sat down in the garden, and he'd say, you know, you have to find the fertile ground first, then you have to plough it, then you seed it, and then you have to nurture it for a time. And you don't want to go and pick the fruit too early. And I think I was about 14 at the time, and it's been a lesson. I'm sure you'd agree that you got to give, but you can't be attached to getting back.
Absolutely. Wise words, hey, too. Attachment is the thing. It's like when you bank on getting a project and you've already spent the money and you don't get it and you go into a depressive state. I think one of the greatest skills that I've worked to master over the years as an entrepreneur is a detachment from the outcome. If I put in a quote, someone wants me for a speaking gig or whatever it is, if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. And I have no attachment to the outcome. And I found, I don't know, for some reason, I win more because I'm not desperate. I'm not needy. Sometimes that can come through. It's a hard one to know, but I encourage my clients. You don't want to come across as needy. No one likes a needy entrepreneur.
No. But that in itself raises an interesting thing, because particularly when people are starting out, there is a need, to put food on the table, pay the bills. So how do we marry this? How do we stay energized, stay seeding, and yet, if it isn't coming as quick as we need it, what do we do?
And I think that's always a tough time, isn't it? It's either that when you're starting and it's tough, or you've been in business for a long time and you hit a tough patch. You've been in a good paddock for a long time, and then all of a sudden you hit a drought, and you go, God, I've got to work again. What do I do? What have I stopped doing? All of those types of things. I mean, I think in the early stages, a couple of things for me that are really important. I think it's really, really vital to have just fantastic people around you, whoever that may be. And I know that's nothing earth-shattering in that. It's not meant to be. But it's often one of the problems we have in the entrepreneurial world now is that because there are so many people, I think, that are operating from home or they're isolated. And it's bloody hard in those times when they go, well, I can't pay the mortgage this month, and my business, maybe my partner's going, well, when are you going to go and get a real job? When are you going to do this? And if you haven't got a network where you can say, well, is this normal? Well, I'd like a mentor. Maybe I can't afford it, or I'll read that book. But isolation to me is one of the biggest issues. And I think you've got to have a good peer group, or at least one or two people who are going to be positive and kind of not support your crap if you start playing misery pots. And you need people that are going to be supportive and firm enough not just to say what you want to hear. And I think that we need that. We need that a lot. I think also it's a lot about rituals. And I know, again, that you're a believer in having the right rituals around and something that my rituals in the morning. I mean, I get up early, 4:30, 5 o'clock every day. My rituals, I read things that will help me. I'll read positive books. I'll check out the latest articles on Inc., Entrepreneur, Flying Solo, whatever it might be. I'll have my affirmations. I'll mind map my day, but it's all around positivity and setting the intent of the day. And you go, well, that sounds very nice and kumbaya-ish, but without a doubt, most of the very successful people I know do something similar. They have a great routine, whether it's nighttime, whatever it is. That's that element. And the third part about it, which I find fascinating and keeps people energized, is keeping your curiosity. You got to stay curious about what's going on around the world. You got to stay curious about other businesses and other entrepreneurs, and that, I think, that keeps you interested, keeps you looking, keeps you coming up with ideas that keep you energized. And again, I think when we meet really smart entrepreneurs that are really successful, most of the time they'll ask you about you. They're curious about your business. I met Richard Branson. I was presenting with him in Melbourne, to just drop a little name here. Me and Richard go back. And what I was amazed about that was with Richard Branson was all he did was ask me about my business. And I thought, wow, I was acting like a 12-year-old schoolgirl. And Richard Branson just wanted to know, how do you do? What do you do? Where are your books sold? It wasn't because he was in awe of me, obviously not, but it was interested in business, interested in other businesses. And I find people who've got that passion and interest in other businesses do tend to be more successful because their curiosity keeps going, what if I did that? How could I do my business better? How could they ask better questions by being curious.
And I think that's it. No, but I think it's interesting as well. And I think I saw somewhere in the last couple of days where Richard, he's been voted the most popular entrepreneur on the planet. And it put a link to an interview with Chris Anderson, the guy from TED who interviewed him. And it was one of the most down-to-earth 30 minutes I've ever watched. Fantastic. And so it makes me think also, so we have this period where we might be needy, but we can't show it, And then there's the other end of the scale too. When we're so busy we can't scratch ourselves. What do we do? What do we do then? Is it the same answer?
No, I think it's a different answer. But back to that first one for a second, I do think we've got to learn the art of the bluff a little bit. And I wrote an article about that a while ago, because I think that when we're starting in business, we do hustle. We learn to bluff. We play above our weight, but that's a part of it as well, isn't it? It's just, you've got to be able to bluff with substance. I think I'm not sure how you do that, but you got to be able to do that. The other extreme, though, when I think you get really busy, and we all get to that stage, hopefully, in our businesses where we go, oh my goodness, everything's crazy. To me, that's a more dangerous stage than when things are tough at the beginning. Because when it's tough at the beginning, you'll do what you need to do to make it work. You'll do everything. When you're at that stage of being crazy busy all the time, you know what it's like. Well, that's when we get fatigued. That's when we burn out. That's when we get fried. That's when we make mistakes. It's when we stop doing the stuff that we used to do. And I have had many examples of that. I worked with a chap for a while in a mentoring role, and basically his business, it expanded, opened up some new offices, and yet his primary business had gone from $2 million a year turnover to $500,000 and wasn't viable anymore. And I said, so what's happened? He said, well, I've expanded. And we all know what it is. I said, so, okay, this is what you need to do to get this one off the ground. You've got to start sending letters to your clients, do reminders, birthday calls. You've got to be doing some PR. And he's sitting there kind of shaking his head, almost in a bit of a smarty kind of way. And I'm going, mate, what's wrong? I said, oh, I'm sorry. He said, it's nothing about what you're saying. He said, everything you're saying I used to do, and I stopped doing because I got too busy. Everything. And he said, now I get it. You can't stop doing that stuff. You've got to keep it. You've got to be doing that stuff all the time. And I had another interesting example in my little business in Cairns, running a marketing company at the time, very, very busy. And I found that my dialogue was dangerous, because it's a small town, and you relied on word of mouth, as most of us hopefully do. And it was interesting for me because someone would walk up to me in the street, and they go, oh, g'day, Andrew, how you going? And you know everyone. Say, g'day, Bob, how you doing? He'd say, oh, how's biz? Oh, man, I am so freaking busy. You got no idea. I can't scratch myself for hour. And I found that I just press play. That was my standard thing, because it's good to tell people you're manic, you're crazy, you're busy. And anyway, I went through this little period where all of a sudden I was getting no referrals. Nothing was coming in. And my business really dived. And I went, holy crap, what are we doing here? So I thought maybe there was a service delivery problem. I think I had about 10 staff. Maybe I've dropped the ball. We've dropped the ball. Something's happened. We're too busy. We're not delivering. So I started to ring all of my referrers. Ring Bob. Hey, Bob, how you going? Mate, I noticed you haven't been referring us lately, and have we done something wrong? He said, mate, not at all. It's just that every time I see you, tell me how busy you are. I don't want to give you a heart attack. So I've been referring your opposition up the road because they've got no one going to them. And I thought, and I rang all my other referrers, and they all said the same thing. Oh, no problem. Just you're so busy. We didn't want to add to your stress level. We didn't want you to drop dead of a heart attack in Lake Street. It'd make too big a mess. And so I had to change my dialogue. And I said, whenever I would get, I had to consciously say, oh, hey, Bob, how you going? Oh, how are you doing, Andrew? Are you busy? I say, mate, we're busy. Business is great, but I've always got room for more quality clients like the people you refer to me. And made that my standard dialogue, reprogrammed my brain, and things got back to normal. So I think the busy period is a dangerous one for us as entrepreneurs on all different types of levels. So what's your take?
Well, I think it's the same thing. I mean, I've got a sort of a similar approach. I always say to people, you know, there's always room for quality.
Exactly.
And you know, you don't. But it is this internal dialogue, and I think that applies both ways. When we're in the famine or we're in the feast. So the trick seems to me, after 25 years of trying to work this out, you know, the trick to me seems to try and keep that feast and famine divide as sort of narrow as possible. And a lot of it is our internal dialogue. So tell me, how do you take care of your self-talk?
It's a good question. It's a good question. And I think that self-talk is the dangerous part again, isn't it? I mean, part of my ritual, part of my world is I really have very little tolerance for negativity in my life. I don't really have any negative people in my life. I don't have any negative clients. I'm very, very particular about that type of stuff. And I'm, probably in a fairly good position where if I don't want to do a job for someone, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I know not everyone is going to be in that space, but I'm a big believer in control starts with that you've got to manage that. So you've got to manage those people around you. Obviously, I've said that a few times now. But also, I'm a big reader. So as you and I read nothing but books around positivity. People always say to me, my place looks like a Dimmick store. And I have friends say to me, you got all these books on positivity and rah-rah, and you're the most positive bloke in the world. What on earth do you need those books for? The reason I'm the most positive bloke on earth is because I've got those books and I know how to use them. That's the whole point. So self-management around that comes in that. And the other thing that I do a lot of, and anyone who knows me, I sneak away and I'll, go down to Tassie and rent a little beach house down in Tassie for a week, or, I'll have a break and just kind of, I manage myself better so that I don't get tired and exhausted, and which then I think can lead to negativity and that, and that I've learned over the years as well. It's taken me a lot of years to really understand the importance of that. That side of it. I celebrate my successes. I try and get better and better at mastering my craft, which is a terribly corny term, but I think it's everything that I believe. It's interesting. I just did a TED talk a couple of weeks ago, TEDx talk, and I just got the recording last night at 9 o'clock, and I stayed up to 1 o'clock reviewing it. So I must have watched it. It's a 15-minute talk, probably 15 times, to just how could I make it better? What did I do there? How would I how I said, and I'd already rehearsed this freaking thing 30 times before I did it, but it was just, I think that pursuit of just trying to get better and better at what I do, and mix that with the right people, and then mix that with the right stuff going into your brain. All of that stuff seems to be what works for me, Ian.
Well, it kind of goes back to where we began, doesn't it? Talking about artists and artisans and just the craft. I mean, it's interesting how I was having a conversation a couple of days ago with a guy that's only just started speaking professionally.
Right.
And he was asking me, he said, what, you probably don't do anything anymore because you've been doing it for so long. And I said, look, mate, I've been paid to speak more than 2,000 times.
Wow.
But I still have a routine. And it's very interesting how you say the same thing. I read at least a book a week.
Yep.
I have regular things I do every day. I take regular breaks, and I said to him, I am still nervous every time I present, and I would be really worried if I wasn't. And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, it's just the body pumping adrenaline." And I said, my father used to say it's about the butterflies flying in formation. But if the butterflies aren't flying, we're in deep trouble. And he was kind of, taken aback. And I said to him, I said, look, I've got about 76 stories. And, and I gave him an example. I said, look, I did their conference 3 or 4 times over a period of about 12 years. And the 4th time, I didn't tell a particular story. And they were really angry with me for not telling the story. And I said to the guy, look, you've heard it 3 times before. I didn't think you want to hear it again.
Yeah, exactly.
And he said to me, well, 30% of the audience had never heard it before. And it was a really valuable lesson. And I said to this guy, even though you're sharing a story, it's the first time for a lot of people in the room. And so I said, I still rehearse. I learned off Dougie Malouf, you stand on a bit of paper and look at a spot on the wall. Now, I still do that. And he was just amazed, and I said, and you can always get better. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing something, you can always get better.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was quite taken aback. So I guess at the end of the day, we're talking about there are fundamentals, but a lot of it's just hard work.
It is. It's like being successful as an author. It's like being. That's one of the things I think that surprise people when I tell them like how do you be successful as an author? And I guess it depends what success means to an individual. And I talk about the hard work starts when the book comes out. And anyone who's written a book knows that's exactly right. You know that. You know, it's the hard work isn't writing the book. The hard work is actually what you've got to do to leverage it. And I remember when my first couple of books had come out, and I'm sitting around waiting for the Ferrari to arrive, and I'm kind of going, well, where's me freaking Ferrari? And of course, then you talk to the publishers and go, oh, well, you know, you've got to do some work to do. And I went, holy crap, I don't like this. I thought it was easy. And then so I went and tracked down people like Zig Ziglar and Anthony Robbins and Louise Hay and you know, try to figure out, well, how have they been successful? And another golden rule, isn't it? Learn from those who have gone before you. And some of them I interviewed, some of them I was fortunate enough to meet, T. Harv Eker and Jack Canfield and people like that in the States, and others I had to kind of deconstruct what they did based on, you know, a bit of investigative stuff. And I thought, okay, well, what's the common denominator? They all worked their frigging butts off. That's how they sold lots of books. I remember the guy, I forget his name now, Steve something or other, who wrote the Fish book and Fish Management book. And Steve London or something?
Steve London, yes. Yes.
London. And I remember he was doing I saw him, he was actually in Cairns. And I said, oh, mate, you know, like I've got some books, and what's your tip for an aspiring, you know, new author? And he said, work your freaking butt off. And he said, I talk at 350 events a year. And he said, at each one, I'm lugging books in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And he said, yeah, you know, we sold a couple of million books. And he said, you reach a point where the critical mass happens and it takes off. And as much as no one wants to hear that it takes work, to me, that's the joy and that's the wonderful part about it. Because if you're prepared to do what it takes, 99% of people are actually not. Most authors aren't successful. Why aren't they successful? Because they're not really prepared to do what it takes to be successful. Like, I mean, I'll spend sometimes $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month buying my own books to give away. Now, most people aren't prepared to do that. And it's not that I'm a genius, it's just that I know that it works. I figured out, well, the more books I give away, the more stuff that comes back to me. And I say, well, my process for what I do to leverage who I am is extraordinary in terms of when I teach people, they just sit there with their jaw on the ground going, you do that? And I go, well, that's why I sold 1 million books. That's why I'm successful. That's why, you know, it's there. It's not because I've written a book that split the atom. It's because I've written a book and I've learned to leverage it. And I don't think that matters whether you're whatever it is you want to do in the entrepreneurial space, that you've got to have that desire to be the best at what you do. And you've got to be prepared then to charge accordingly is the only other caveat I'll have on that, because I've got to be in my bonnet that people don't charge for what they're worth.
You know, let's have a talk about that in a moment. But it's interesting.
Sure.
It flashed in my mind that old saying that the dictionary is the only place where success comes before work. And yet most people, you know, it's just you know, hard yakka. And it seems to me that it's almost, I mean, one of my favourite little books, you probably read this one too, Andrew, is Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah, great book.
And it's all about that book's all about overcoming our resistance, or as Seth Godin would call it, you know, the lizard brain.
Lizard thinking. Yeah.
Lizard thinking. And I think to lead into this question about how much do we charge, it seems to me that one of the reasons why most people don't charge enough for their work, whether that's a painting, a speech, a book, whatever it might be, the reason that people don't charge enough is because the lizard brain says you're not worth it.
Absolutely.
And overcoming that's a big part of being an entrepreneur. I think we all go through phases where, whether we're booming or not, and everything in between, we all go through phases of feeling we're not good enough. How do we stay on top of that?
But I think I certainly had that. There's no doubt at all. I mean, I grew up with that whole "you're not good enough" kind of concept, and it was a hard one for me to overcome. Advice-wise, well, how I overcome it, a couple of different ways. I was married to a lovely Italian Yugoslav lady who really got value. You know, she'd worked in an advertising agency in the 80s, so she knew how to charge excessively and not feel guilty about it for a second. And And in our business, like I was shocking. I'd do everything for nothing if I could. I'd want to be the kung fu guy of small business, wander around the land just giving sage advice. And the money part was always the awkward. She was all about, you got to charge what you're worth, Andrew. You're great at what you do. You got to charge for it. So she did the quoting. I wasn't even allowed to look at the quoting in this marketing thing. But someone will come in and people know how to manipulate you if you're one of those low self-worth kind of people. And I'd do it for $500. I'd see some of the quotes that she'd put like a $10,000 fee on it. And I'd have, oh my God, you can't charge $10,000. And of course, she got everything she quoted. She was beautiful and she quoted and vivacious and knowledgeable, and people, yeah, of course. And I went, you got what? How much for doing that? Seriously? And I thought, God almighty, how could you do that? And she said, do you think we're worth it? I said, well, yes, but the little voice inside me doesn't. And those kind of things. So basically avoidance was how I came to terms with that one. I got someone else to do the quoting. But what was really valuable for me was when I became a speaker and all of a sudden to be charging well, you know what it's like. Normally, you start off in the speaking world doing it for nothing, and you're talking at the opening of a pie shop, at the Rotary meeting, and all the rest of it. And then you get that big job. And I remember my first $250 job because I finally said, I charge, and someone said, oh, all right, here's $250. Go and talk for 12 hours, and I remember my first kind of like $2,000, $1,650 actually was a job that I got paid. My first kind of big amount, and going, wow, $1,650 for 1 hour. Now, we all know it's not 1 hour. We'll take that out of the equation. You're still getting paid $1,650 for that period of time. I'd never kind of imagined that. And then, of course, you start getting paid $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000, whatever it might be. And you're kind of going, wow, someone's prepared to pay me that amount of money for a 1 hour presentation. It's very, very good for the soul to go, well, and to get great feedback and extremely grateful. And can you come back next year? Can you do this? Can you come back for 2 days? And it'll be like a $20,000 project. And you're going, yeah, okay. And you eventually start to believe it. And that was very, very beneficial for me. But how do you create that otherwise? I think that you've got to, I don't know, it's a tough one. I struggle with that because I see so many people that undercharge and they do an extraordinary job at what they do. And I try so hard to convince them to charge more than they do. And I can give that advice to everyone. I've spent half today on coaching calls, mentoring calls with clients, telling them to charge more, double your rates. And couldn't double my rates. I say, yes, you can. You're worth it. You're fantastic. Lose those clients you got because you don't want them. You want the ones that are going to pay you and respect you, exactly your line. They're going to love you. You're going to love them. And I give the advice till the cows come home. But I've only really learnt it myself by speaking, I think, and marrying an Italian Yugoslav lady. So that might be difficult for some people who are pre-married, or perhaps not. Some of the women in the audience might be problematic as well.
Well, mate, it's a Yugoslav husband for those.
I'm not sure if they had the same sense of self-worth, but quite possibly.
I love the Alan Weiss story where he worked for many years with the guy whose name escapes me now. He was his original mentor. But anyhow, every time this guy used to quote a fee, he'd then put a cigar in his mouth. And Alan got jack of this and said to him one day, how come every time you quote a fee, you then put a cigar in your mouth? And the guy said, to stop myself from laughing. And it kind of is a bit. I remember the first time I ever quoted, above the 1,000 mark in my early days. I thought of that Alan's story and metaphorically put the cigar in my mouth. And ever since, I sort of played along because it's amazing. It's really only a number.
It is.
And if people, value is an interesting thing. And let's kind of round out our conversation with some stuff about value. I'd be interested in your take, because I think at the end of the day, whatever business we're in, whatever we're entrepreneuring at the end of the day, we get paid because other people value what we do or what we have. What's your your take on value, delivering value?
Well, I mean, I'm writing a book at the moment. It's called "Someone's Got to Be the Most Expensive. It may as well be you." And
Okay,
and when you
great title.
when you go into the next page, the first page is, "But if you're going to be the most expensive, you've got to be the best." And that's my whole trip in there. Is that these days, now more than ever, it is about value, because I think that we as consumers are so much more demanding, educated, expectant, all of those type of things, that if we find a business that respects us, loves us, treats us well, gives us great value, we will crawl across broken glass to support that business and to look after them. People say there's no loyalty anymore. I disagree with that completely. I think there's more loyalty now than there's ever been. But there's loyalty to things. Maybe loyalty to a brand, loyalty to an individual is maybe not as obvious because it moves around. But I think that delivering value is a complex thing, because value comes in different shapes and forms. It's not like just I buy a pie for $5 and that pie is a good pie at $5 worth. That's I'm happy with that as a value transaction. It's actually, I think, got so much deeper now. We want value to come from that. I'm spending my $5 with this pie company. Part of my value expectation is that they're a good company, that they're an active part of the community, that they employ perhaps some people that are disabled, or they contribute back to this society in somehow. I think value is a deeper commitment that we're looking for. And sometimes the product is the least measurement of the value. It's everything else. It's what they stand for. It's what they believe in. It's that I met the CEO for Nudie recently, the Nudie drinks.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the chap's name, unfortunately. It's terrible, isn't it? And I just remember him talking so passionately about the product and about how important it is for them to use as much Australian product as they could, to make sure that the people that were getting it were buying a drink, that when they got it, they believed in the brand, they believed in what Nudie stood for and all the rest of it. And that was such a great discussion of a man who's extraordinarily proud of his product, but of the entire business. And again, he got that whole value is not just about how much something is or any of that kind of stuff. It's a much deeper proposition, and I think we need to all consider that in our own offering. That I go and do a 1 hour keynote and everyone's happy and leave. Is that the end of it? I don't believe so. Nor is it the beginning. I think that the value had to come in many ways ahead of time. How you communicate, how you deliver, how you deliver on the expectation, all of those kind of things. Yes. It's a mighty word.
It really is the package, isn't it? And one of my favourite books is The Experience Economy. Because it is about. Customer service is so 20th century. It's about the whole experience, and from when you're speaking point of view, it's that. It's before they even contacted you, when they contacted you, the research, the presentation, the mixing at the gathering, the after work, there's a whole, and there's so many things that you can do to provide value in that sense.
Or to erode it, or to damage the value. Indeed. and it's the old thing. We go to a restaurant that delivers fantastic food and lousy service, will be totally unforgiving. But we go to a restaurant where the food is lousy but the service is extraordinary. Statistically, we're more likely to refer that restaurant, because we place a higher value on the service than we do on the quality of the food.
Yes.
Psychologically, which is an interesting kind of a point. And I think, though, that now we're living in a world where we're trying to find value is taking many different shapes as well.
Yes.
Look at like an espresso machine. Now, that to me is one of the most extraordinary devices on the face of the planet. Now we've got huge shops in the CBD area, 2 stories of freaking selling pods. And you're going, seriously, like, how did that become such an extraordinary kind of a business? Because it's convenient, I guess. The value is really the convenient factor, and it's got George Clooney promoting it. Is probably the smartest thing that they've done. But do you see what I mean there? Like, the value is a complicated thing, because the value now is the whole story of an espresso kind of machine, the whole idea, the whole picture, and And I think where businesses now, we've got to look for finding value in different ways and saying, well, the mutual kind of thing. And I think we'll see more of that, companies joining together to deliver. Like they're talking about new cars coming out. You'll buy the shell, but then you'll buy a Bose stereo. Then you'll get all the plug-in parts are all branded. Like phones of the future will be you buy a shell, and then all the plug-ins are all, they're all from different providers. So everyone's bringing a different bit of value because we've got more value expectations.
Well, fascinating. You used a word there. I think it's the first time the word has been used in our conversation, and yet it's everything about our conversation. And that's the word story.
I love storytelling.
And it's been fascinating to have you sharing part of your story today. And to me, that's probably the key is how we help people to share our value story. That's how things spread, and that's how our business as entrepreneurs grows. So anything further on story? I mean, how does the story spread?
How long have we got?
Well, it's probably a whole new conversation.
It is. I did some workshops last year with a buddy of mine called Nick Bowditch on storytelling and as a concept. And storytelling in business, predominantly what we were talking about. How do you tell stories? How do you tell your story? And interestingly enough, Australians, we're not very good at it because we still have this bit of a thing going where you shouldn't talk about yourself too much because you're a bit of a wally if you do that. And the tall poppy syndrome, unfortunately, is still strong. Yeah. Luckily, the new gens coming through, they know that they've got to be able to tell their story. They've got to pitch it. And I think as well, when you get on a stage and you tell your story, when you talk from your heart or you tell another story about something else, you share an anecdote, whatever it might be, that's when you capture the audience. And I think giving people the permission to tell the story of their business, because I say a lot of businesses, the problem is that they go to all this trouble to tell their potential customers how they're exactly the same as every other competitor. You go to an accountant site and all it'll tell you, we do tax, fair income. Really, no other accountant does tax. We do business reviews. Seriously. We do court, and go to a lawyer. I know some specialised to a degree, but, really, we offer legal services. And you look at it and go, well, tell people how you're different, not how you're the same. And one of the best ways to tell people how you're different is through telling the story of your business. And a great example that I have of this is I work with a dairy farm up here in Cairns, or up in the Tablelands, Mungali Creek Dairy, and I've worked with them since they started. And they're organic. And now they could tell the story, hey, we grow good cows and our produce is really nice and it's organic and it's healthy. And that's okay. That's a good story. But the real story comes from the owner, the guy who founded it. And one day he was at the back of a workshop that I was doing for some crazy government department. And this tiny little guy comes up and says, so, what do you do, mate? He says, I make the best cheese in Australia. And I go, seriously, good on you. And he said, yeah, hopefully I'm going to be able to sell it. And anyway, it went on, and over the years, I've helped them with their branding and all the rest of it. And the story's amazing, like how they did the struggle and his dream and his vision, and even things like to go organic. No one else in the area would go organic. He had to go alone, so he lives and dies still to this day, even by his own things, by his own business. But he had to make this machinery to get flies off of cows. So he designed and invented a cow vacuum cleaner, where the cow goes into this room. And it turns a button, the cow's eyes cross, and all the flies get sucked up in this vacuum cleaner thing. And then they use the flies as fertilizer on the farm. I said, those are the stories that we all want to hear. Tell the story of your business. And why did you start it? What do you believe in? What are you passionate about? What do you want to achieve? What do you stand for? And we don't do enough of that. We tell the beige story. I'm an accountant. I do tax. I don't want to know that. I want to know that you're a mad keen bike rider. You're a fisherman, and you're passionate about helping small businesses to be successful. That's my accountant, not the guy that does tax. I can get that done online. I can do that myself with Xero these days. It's like, and I think from a storytelling point of view, we could talk about it. I'd love to talk about it for a session, but my biggest thing is tell your story about you and your business. What do you stand for? What do you believe in? Why are you different? Where are you going? What floats your boat so much that you get out of bed in the morning to do it? And if you can't tell a story like that, you kind of shouldn't be doing what you're doing. And that's a tough thing to say, but to me, passion equals profit. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, then don't expect anyone else to be.
No, and look, anyone can do it too. It's because it is about. I learned this a very long time ago when I thought I was in one of my very early presentations, and I thought I was absolutely laid him in the aisles. I thought I was going great at the break, and this guy came up to me. I think I was in my late 30s, and he was probably at least over 60, and he came to me and he said, "Can I see him?" And he pulled me over the corner of the room, and he said, "You're obviously a very smart young man." And I went, "Oh," and I kind of, stood up tall.
Well, of course I am,
And he said, "It's a bloody shame you're not showing it."
Oh.
And I went, what do you mean? He said, "No one on the earth wants to hear what's in your head. They only want to hear what's in your heart. Go back in there and tell them what's on share what's on your heart." And I was so, I felt terrible at the time, but I was so grateful for that advice in the early days, because it's the difference between most speakers, most entrepreneurs. If you tell your story from your heart, people get it because it touches what's in their heart. It's not the story, it's how they hear themselves in the story.
Exactly. Yeah. I always say that I became a good speaker when I stopped trying to be one. And when I kind of went, that I want to talk from the heart. I want to talk with authenticity. And I also found it very relieving. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't rehearse. It doesn't mean I do it on the fly. But when I'm on stage, it is from the heart. I don't care if a slide goes wrong. I don't care if there's those little things that go wrong. You learn to deal with all of that stuff. But what I do care is that I engage with my audience, and then I do that through authenticity, exactly the same as you. And I think consumers get that. You find a passionate business owner who's so proud of the stuff. Like my dairy farmer friend, Rob, any day of the week, you could go up there. He's in there with the cows. He'll be in there doing what's going on. And you go up there and he'll say, "Mate, come and try this. Come and try this. This you got to try." So you're kind of almost drinking from a cow's udder. Go, "Mate, can I at least get a bit of coffee around the outside of this udder?" They're there. A buddy of mine is one of the most successful photographers in the world, Peter Lick, and he recently sold a couple of images for $11 million. Hey. The highest price ever paid for 3 photographic images was $11.5 million. And all the rhetoric started to come out. Well, it's not really art, and it's like blah blah blah. All the artists of the world, and I wrote an article about this again for Inc. That what I saw in knowing Pete was actually he still remains the hardest working man I've ever met in my life. And ever. I've never met anyone who even comes close to him. He's a lunatic, absolute lunatic. And but you ring Pete, if it was 4 o'clock somewhere, 4 a.m. so he lives in Hawaii now, ring 4 a.m, he'll be out taking photos, getting ready, set up. Any day of the week, he's out. Now, he's a multi-millionaire. He doesn't need to go and take photos anymore. That's exactly where he will be. And there will be someone there, and he will be so passionate about his images. It's not put on. It's just, it's what he is. And you look at that energy, you can't help but go, "Man, here's my credit. Just give me one. Let me buy." It's that passion creates so much. And if you can tell your story passionate, it doesn't mean you need to be over the top. And I know that that's not what you're saying either. But you've got to be from the heart.
It's got to be real.
We've got to be real. We've got such extraordinary bullshit detectors. Like we see that a million miles away. Australians in particular, where you go to America, you just turn up and you get a standing ovation. That's why we love to speak in America. It's awesome. But Australians are the crossed arms. You got to freaking prove to me that this is worth 20 minutes of my time to listen to you, young fella. But as soon as people know that you're authentic and you're telling truth, you're telling from the heart, anyone will listen to you and anyone will trust you, and you've got to honour that. That's the key, as far as I'm concerned, is if someone gives you that trust, you've got to honour it. Because,
yes.
I hate it when people abuse that or manipulate or use it in a wrong way. I find that's probably the worst of all kind of things to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Look, it's been brilliant, Andrew, but we could talk all day. And what I will do is let's talk again specifically about sharing stories. I reckon that would be
I'd love to.
just a great thing. So we'll do that. Now, there's some folk online who registered as observers, but I'm going to give you the opportunity, if you wanted to ask Andrew a question, then you just need to put your mic on, and it's fine if you don't as well. But if you'd like to, here's your opportunity.
No question. Just Andrew, great listening to you as always. Ian, be careful what you ask for. He starts talking about the power of stories. It's a long conversation, but it's bloody fantastic. And I just got to tell you, I've just gone through your speakers program the second time. Love it. Keep an eye out for a thing called the Clarity CEO hitting the airwaves round about the second week of July. That's a little project of mine. But, mate, you're as generous as always. Lovely to listen to you. Ian, fantastic questions, really well facilitated. I have to run off now because I've got a call with one of my clients. But really lovely.
Well,
lovely
there you go.
Ian.
Fantastic.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you virtually, Jeff. Thank you, mate. Very kind of you, my friend. Take care.
Okay, thank you so much. So is there anyone else online who would like to ask a question? As I say, this is your opportunity. If not, that's fine too. Okay, terrific. Andrew, a parting word. What would you think would be? I think if people who have listened to this conversation aren't energized, then I don't know what we could possibly do, because it has been energetic, there's no doubt. But what would be your kind of final words on the energized entrepreneur?
Aspire, work, dream to be the best at what you do. Someone's got to be the most expensive. It may as well be you. If you're going to be the most expensive, you've got to be the best, and be prepared to do what others won't. You'll never go hungry. You'll never need to be chasing clients. You'll have an extraordinary business if you're prepared to do what it takes.
Fantastic. Well, folks, thanks so much for joining us. I'm just going to press the recording button, and then we'll be offline. So if you just hang there for a moment, Andrew. So folks, my special guest today has been Australia's #1 small business selling entrepreneur, Andrew Griffiths. It's been fantastic. Thank you, Andrew, and we'll see you soon on the next Candid and Convivial conversation.